Hello, and welcome to Environmental Policy News. I'm your host, Derek LaRange. In today's edition, we will be discussing the province of Quebec's government-owned and operated powerhouse, Hydro-Quebec. We will have two guests, Noah Hilbert and Kyle Kriegest, who will be talking to us about a project Hydro-Quebec has planned on the Romaine River. Noah is studying natural resource conservation and is concerned about what the project will mean for ecosystems of the Romaine. Kyle, on the other hand, is representing Hydro-Quebec and will give his argument for why the dam should be constructed. Hopefully by the end of this talk, we will have a clearer sense of what's at stake and how we might proceed. However, before we get to that, I want to give you all a bit of background information regarding Hydro-Quebec so that we can all go into this talk on equal terms. As I mentioned, Hydro-Quebec is government-owned and operated. Over the years, it has bought out all other production of power in the province and created a number of large reservoirs through the construction of 60 dams. However, while hydropower is the main source of energy, Hydro-Quebec has other means of production as well, including a nuclear power plant and 28 fossil fuel burning plants. They also currently buy the electricity from 9 wind farms, another hydro station, and other independent power producers around the province. Hydro-Quebec is able to produce enormous amounts of energy. From its hydro stations alone, it can produce nearly 34,500 megawatts of electricity, and it can produce about 44,000 megawatts total. Those 28 fossil fuel burning stations I mentioned only contribute 1,500 megawatts to the system, accounting for a trivial percentage of the total output. Now, if you're like me, this information won't do you much good, so let's put this into more useful terms. An average medium-sized house will use about 50 kilowatt hours in a day. That means that in 1 hour, Hydro-Quebec produces enough electricity to power nearly 2,500 houses for the whole day, using just hydropower. With those kinds of numbers, it's no surprise that Hydro-Quebec produces more electricity than the province uses and exports power to the other Canadian provinces and to the United States. However, in order to get the electricity to these places, it needs to set up transmission lines. In fact, even getting the electricity from the reservoirs in the northern part of the province into the southern part, where most of the people are, is quite a trek. All lines combined, the system covers over 21,000 miles. It's worth considering that distribution is a new issue in itself. It often requires deforesting long straight swaths of land, called right-of-ways, so that utility lines can be established. The towers are considered an eyesore by those who like the landscape unadulterated. However, a recent argument in defense of the transmission line rights-of-way is that it creates areas of permanently managed early successional forest habitat, which is good for many species in northeastern North America. Now, with all that under our belt, let's consult our first guest. Kyle, would you tell us a bit about why you feel that Hydro-Quebec should build this dam?
Thank you, Derek. Well, let me first tell you why hydroelectricity is the best type of renewable energy. Hydroelectricity is one of the greenest forms of energy that we have developed to date, and it provides almost 1/5 of the world's power. It has the potential to be a high renewable energy source that is gaining a lot of support all over the world, as it is rated one of the best types of renewable energy from the top World Conference on Sustainable Development. This conference found 10 reasons why hydroelectricity is a great renewable energy. These reasons are: 1. Hydroelectricity uses the energy of running water without reducing its quality, which is why it is considered a renewable energy source. 2. The flexibility and storage capacity of hydroelectric power plants make them more efficient and economical in supporting the use of intermittent sources of renewable energy, such as solar energy. 3. River water is a domestic resource which, contrary to fuel or natural gas, is not subject to market fluctuations. 4. Hydroelectric power plant reservoirs collect rainwater, which can then be used for consumption or for irrigation. In storing water, they protect the water tables against depletion and reduce our vulnerability to floods and droughts. 5. Hydroelectricity increases the stability and reliability of electricity systems. 6. The hydroelectric life cycle produces very small amounts of greenhouse gases, which can help slow global warming. 7. Hydroelectric power plants don't release pollutants into the air, reducing the amount of acid rain and smog. 8. Hydroelectric installations bring electricity, highways, industry, and commerce to communities, thus developing the economy. 9. With an average lifetime of 50 to 100 years, hydroelectric developments are long-term investments that can benefit from various generations. 10. Hydroelectric enterprises that are developed and operated in a manner that is economically viable, environmentally sensible, and socially responsible represent the best concept of sustainable development. The Romaine Hydroelectric Complex project is economically feasible and also environmentally safe. The new dam complex will boost the economy in Quebec immensely. Yes, it is estimated that the cost of building will be about $6.5 billion, but this project is expected to generate $3.5 billion for just Quebec alone. Employment will rise dramatically from all of the new construction jobs. During the peak years of construction, from 2012 to 2016, there will be around 2,000 workers per year. As the energy created from this project is all renewable and clean, the estimated output of 8 terawatt-hours will lessen the need of natural resources and lower the amount of greenhouse gases. This amount of energy is enough to power more than 450,000 households. If we compare that number to the town of Amherst, which has a little over 3,000 households, the amount of power produced from this complex will be able to generate 150 Amhersts over a year. The environmental impact of the dams will be minimal because of the steps taken to reduce the damage to the landscape. The Romaine Hydroelectric Complex project is affected by the Fisheries Act and Navigable Waters Protection Act, but was able to get approval from the Law List Regulations of the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act, also known as the CEAA. The CEAA is comprised of a joint review panel, and they received 24 recommendations from multiple environmental agencies. They took these into consideration and responded with an action to adhere to the recommendations. One specific environmental concern was the increase in mercury to the fish. However, given the local population's eating habits, the increase in mercury will not create a concern for the public health. This project is investing over $200 million in environmental protection. This money is being spent on the following protections: $20 million to the Atlantic Salmon Development Program, over 20 years. The protection of downriver in-stream flows to preserve fish habitats. The creation of spawning areas and stocking of lakes and tributaries. The telemetric monitoring of forest caribou. The recovery of merchantable timber in reservoirs and at dam sites, the replanting and reforestation of work vicinity, the installation of launching ramps at each reservoir, and the construction of a snowmobile bridge downstream from the Romaine 1 facility. With all of these environmental protections in place, and with the large incentive of a boosted economy, the Romaine Hydroelectric Complex project is a feasible dam project.
Thanks, Kyle. That was an insightful argument for the dam. Noah, what can you tell us about the ecological effects of the dam on this river?
Thanks, Derek. Let me begin by saying that Kyle's addressed a few of the concerns about the environment already, but has left out some major influencing factors that the dams have had on the ecological river systems in Quebec. First, it's important to pay attention to the fish. The salmon, once born, are called fry. They begin life in small-sized streams and adjust their bodies to fit the chemical makeup of a stream, including mercury. As the fish grow, they become what's called smolt and migrate out into the ocean. The salmon spend 4 to 5 years out in the ocean, migrating as far north as Greenland. When the adult salmon head back upstream to where they spawned, dams stop them. Given that only 50% of the original generation that made it to the Gulf of the stream, an even smaller percentage actually make it to their original spawning grounds. The creation of current dams has already made the population of salmon in Lake Ontario extinct, and the population as of 2008 was estimated to be only 200 fish. The Atlantic Salmon Federation states that in late 2009, a recovery strategy was released, although this was still not a recovery plan. The 20 million given by Hydro-Quebec to restore the salmon will do no good if the fish still can't get back to their spawning grounds, and there's no plan to do so yet in place. The Cree tribe have notoriously opposed the building of dams and power lines, given the fact that they had seen the poisoning of the fish and destruction of native hunting lands. The Cree challenged the production of dam construction. The Cree settled for a payment by Hydro-Quebec in 2002 on the condition that they would drop all lawsuits against the government. The Cree most likely agreed to the conditions, being promised $3.4 billion from Hydro-Quebec between now and 2050. The flooding of land destroys homes of many animals and raises the toxicity of water for many aquatic animals. The flooding of such areas has caused an unsafe increase in mercury levels in fish and produces CO2. You may ask, how does flooding create CO2? CO2 is produced from the decomposition of trees and other organic life underwater, which also creates the production of methane and other harmful gases to the ozone. The 5 largest Hydro-Quebec reservoirs cover an area of nearly 5,750 square miles. To give you some perspective, that's about half the size of the state of Massachusetts. Imagine the amount of CO2 that would produce if half of Massachusetts forests were decomposing underwater. The construction of new hydroelectric dams will damage the environment beyond repair. The dams block the flow of water so that the salmon and other fish cannot return to their breeding grounds. The dam will drastically affect what's left of the fish populations, as well as other animals that depend on fish as a main food source. The loss of animal diversity is evident from other projects that have killed thousands of animals in a very quick amount of time. Take, for example, the herd of 10,000 caribou that were killed by the sudden release of water from a Hydro-Quebec dam near the Inuit town of Kujuk. Hydro-Quebec should focus development of renewable energy power plants that have less of an effect on the environment, such as geothermal, wind energy, or solar. These technologies do not drastically impact the delicate food webs throughout Quebec and Canada at large. Not to mention, the development of renewable energy plants pay for themselves over time, making the sale of energy in the future 100% profit.
Wow, that was eye-opening. Thank you, Noah. Folks, it would seem like we've got a really tough decision ahead of us. Should we go ahead with the damming of the Romaine? I mean, large-scale hydropower isn't quite so sustainable as we may have thought, but the question remains, can small-scale alternatives provide enough energy for a growing population with an increasing demand for clean energy? All things considered, I have to say this dam isn't appealing, even with my desire to see more clean energy put into the grid. I personally think it would likely be wiser to settle for less destructive methods at the cost of producing less energy. I have faith in human ingenuity, and I know that before long, green energy technology will exist that will allow us to harness the power of the wind, the sun, the water, and the earth much more efficiently and without endangering natural ecosystems. However, that's only my opinion, and rather optimistic at that. So we leave it to you. Make your choice and let your voice be heard. That wraps up today's broadcast of Environmental Policy News. Thanks to those of you who have stayed tuned in. I hope you'll join me again next time. Until then, viewers, stay classy.
I've got to admit, it's getting better.